Hey everyone, this is Joey Stone here on the Traxion channel, and today I'm going to take you around the Homestead-Miami Speedway and give you the tips and necessary needs to make sure you're fast on the track so you can go win some races. Let's go ahead and get started. Alright, as we're heading down the front straightaway here, we're going to cross that finish line. Make sure you're riding that wall as much as you possibly can. Now heading into turn number 1 here, you want to arc that corner. Don't enter too low, otherwise that car is going to go up the track. As you go into turn number 1, make sure you lay off the gas, let it coast in, and then get back on the gas very lightly. I would go about maybe 50 to 75% on that throttle until you feel comfortable to carry that car out of turn number 2. Same thing out of turn number 2 here. Keep it on that wall here as long as you possibly can. Let off the gas, let the car coast and turn down with the momentum, and let the throttle carry the car and turn it. Like I said, 50 to 75% throttle here, and make it carry on out of the corner up to the finish line. A great tip that I love to use here at Homestead to see if you're executing the corner rightfully is seeing when your car gets near the white line in turns 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. If you hit this right and let off the gas and let the car coast down, you'll be able to nearly go full throttle right by that white line. You might want to be a seam or two off of the white line to where the car won't get too loose, but when you hit that throttle, you'll be able to carry the car up the banking out of turns 2 and 4 to carry that speed. Now here is a big tip if you see yourself battling for position or at least in the lead. There is a great way to defend your position and make it very hard for your competitor to pass you. It's called riding the top lane. Now you can ride either the wall, but if I recommend a lane, I would recommend driving the middle. You can notice where the middle is by looking at the color on the track. The part of the track that is more darker means there's more rubber there. When you run that part, that means you have more grip. When you run the middle, it makes it very hard for someone behind you to go to the bottom and take a pass. Since there's less grip down on the bottom, the driver has to back off of the throttle more. Whereas you drive the middle, that means that you can get back on the gas quicker and carry your speed off the corner. If you execute this right, it will be very hard for your competitor to pass you, and you can easily get to the line and take the checkered flag. Now we know everyone that's watching this video may not be a pro level or even intermediate level, maybe someone who's just beginning on the game. So I'm going to give you guys some lap time goals, that way you guys can work on your setup to where you can build to where you're the most comfortable with and see if you can hit these lap times. Now, for the pro level, anywhere below 31.5 is off to a great start. If you're at an intermediate level, anywhere from a 31.5 to a 31.7 or 8 would be a way for an intermediate. Now, if you're a beginner driver, anywhere between a 32 flat to a 32.5 is a great way to get started on this track. Homestead is a very quick-paced track. It seems like it takes a while to finish these laps, but the way to win these races is to make sure that you get off the corner with great speed and carry speed down the front and back straightaway. If you follow these tips and follow what I told you, you'll be sure to cross the line first and take the checkered flag and do some awesome burnouts. Now let's go ahead and look at the setup here. As you can see on your menu, you have the shocks, the weight, the springs, the tire settings, the miscellaneous settings, and further on. So it's a really difficult challenge when building a setup to understand what parts of the car make what work. So when we go to our shocks here, when you look at the bumps and rebounds, it really is different compared to the front and the rear. On the front, the bump affects cars going into the corner under braking, while the rebound affects cars exiting the corner under throttle. Meanwhile, in the rear, the bumps affects cars exiting the corner under the throttle, and the rebound will affect the car going into a corner under braking. Now, for a track like Homestead that has a pretty decent-sized banking and carries a lot of top speed, I want to make sure my shocks are pretty well balanced down the line. I don't really ever put my shocks mixing around each other a lot, really spread it apart, so let's go straight down the middle. Let's run a 5 or a 6, depending on your opinion here, for the shocks. This allows the car to have equal balance going into the corner, out of the corner, on the throttle, and off the throttle. Now, when we go to the weight settings here, the left weight is going to add more weight, loosening up the chassis. Less is going to tighten it, and using that front weight, more front weight is going to better turn and create more of a mid-corner push, and it's going to tighten that car under braking. When you look at the wedge is going to make the car either looser if you go lower, higher if you want to go tighter. The front ride height is going to lower the shift's weight in front of you, while the rear ride height is going to adjust the weight to the front, which is going to improve that front grip, make it a little bit looser though. Now, when we go to the weight settings here for Homestead, I'm going to go with a 54.2 on the left, a 51.8 on the front weight, a 55 on the wedge, and the front and rear ride height both are going to be at a 4.0. I rarely put the front and rear ride heights up a 4 at any sort of track. This is sort of the go-to when it comes to those heights. Now let's move on to the spring settings. The spring settings go like this. On the front of the car, Softer front is going to loosen the car, it's going to turn it better, but if you make it more stiffer, it's going to tighten the car, which is going to prevent weight transition to the front of the corner. Now, if you go to the rear, a softer rear is going to tighten the car on exit, which means the stiffer car is going to be looser. So this is going to prevent the weight transition to the rear exiting the corner. So you got to be very careful when it comes to your springs. When it comes to Homestead, I'm going to put my front springs both at 1200. The reason why I'm doing this is because I want it to be balanced, like I said earlier. You want the car to be loose, but you don't want it to be too loose to be able to get back on the throttle and carry that speed with the front of the car. At the rear, this is where it gets a little tricky. You don't want the car to be too loose in the middle or too tight off the middle. So for the left, we're going to go with a 560, and then on the right spring, we're going to go with a 580. Now let's move on to the tire settings. Tire pressures are actually a lot more important than some people may think. The lower tire setting, the more grip, but with higher temps, that's going to make the tires lose more grip down the road. A higher setting is going to give it less grip, but it's going to have lower temps. This is going to let your tires last longer into the run. This is a really important factor, especially when it comes to the tire wear that is set for your race. If it's a ×2 or up, I highly recommend doing some research on tire settings if you want to make sure you have the right pressures for your setup. Now, when it comes to the tire pressures, the left front, I'm going to put it at a 22. The right front, I'm going to put at a 54. The left rear, I'm going to put also at a 22. And the right rear, I'm going to put at a 53. Now, doing this, it's going to balance the car out enough to where you're not going to get too loose on the tires, especially on that right rear tire, because that tire is going to take the most effort of burning because you're carrying more speed and turning the car more through a track like Homestead. Now, when we move on to the miscellaneous settings, more positive camber is going to make the car turn better, but will have higher tire wear. The lower your camber is, the car won't turn as well at the beginning, but your tire wear will last longer. For this kind of camber, you want the left side tires to turn more. Less wear happens on the left side tire, so it's okay to mess around with this. Let's go with a 3.8 on the left front camber and a -2.0 on the right front camber. Moving on to the sway bar, if you increase this, it's going to tighten the car. Lowering it will loosen it in general. Put it right in the middle at a 1500. It's the perfect balance between tight and loose. Now, let's move on to the track bars. The track bars are really important and can be a make or break situation to whether either you're celebrating in victory lane or on pit road finishing second. If you raise both sides, it's going to loosen the chassis. Lowering both sides is going to tighten the chassis. Now for the left track bar, since it's on the left side of the car, we're going to put this at a 14.63. And the right track bar is also going to be at a 14.63. Now, the reason why these track bars are going to be so high up, especially on my setup, is because since we already have a tight car in the front with the front weight and the wedge, this is going to make the car bounce out to where the rear of the car will turn just fine. Moving on to the brake bias here is not really that big of a deal, but if you especially want to make sure that you're braking the car enough and maybe getting a run off the corner or even come off the pit road, we're going to put this at a 78%. Now, moving on to grill tape. The more tape you put on, more downforce, but the closer you are in the draft, the car will get hotter. Lesser tape is going to make sure the car does not overheat, which allows more accessibility to what you want to do with it. Let's put the grill tape at a 45. For the wheel lock, I'm going to put it at a 6. You want to make sure the wheel stays pretty firm, especially at a track like this, where turning and keeping a car straight is very, very important. And going to the steering offset, we're going to put this at a solid 0.050. Now here come the gears. The gears can be something very, very important when it comes to making sure you either get a good restart or good longevity of top speed at a track like Homestead-Miami Speedway. For the first gear, let's put it at a 3.0, the second gear at a 1.95, third gear at a 1.40, and that fourth gear is locked, so there's no need to touch it. And the rear end ratio is going to be a 3.33. What gears and rear end ratio do makes a big difference in your car. It allows you to understand how much fuel you're burning, how much RPM you're putting in, and how much top speed you'll be getting out of it too. Too much gear is going to make your car overcook and is not going to be able to get what you need out of the whole entire car. And with that, guys, that is the end to the track guide. I hope the tips I gave you will help you get better at Homestead-Miami Speedway and with driving just in general when it comes to NASCAR Heat 5. Don't forget to like and subscribe for all of our upcoming content here on Traxion. Once again, I am Joey Stone, and as I always like to say, stay sloppy.